Welcome to Homeward Bound, a podcast about how we find our bearings when we turn aside from the big path, the one that was meant to lead to the future, and go looking for the small path, the web of branching paths that takes us back into relation with each other, with this living earth and all those with whom we share it. I'm Dougal Tyne, author of At Work in the Ruins, co-founder of Dark Mountain and a school called Home. In this episode, I want to lean into a couple of themes that have been on my heart lately. First, the question of how we show up for each other across generations, acknowledging the difference in what it asks to gather around these questions, depending on what season of life you're in. So I'm talking with a writer who's a lot younger than me, Isabelle Drury. What we're talking about brings me to a second question: how we navigate that line that I was exploring a couple of episodes ago with Ashley from Doomer Optimism. The line between doom and optimism. The words we bring when we speak to the trouble around and ahead, and how we walk that line between what Vanessa Machado de Oliveira names as projective hope and projective despair. We had some microphone trouble on this recording, so you'll notice that the sound quality on Isabelle's end picks up midway through the conversation. I hope you can bear with the issues and that the quality of the conversation itself is what comes through. Thank you for listening and sharing and responding to these episodes. Hello, Isabelle. Nice to be talking to you. For those who are new to your work, we know each other through the spaces of conversation around a school called Home, but also through your public writing on Substack, where you write a Substack called Finding Sanity. And I was looking again at the description of it, and you say it's about trying to make sense of it all without falling into a pit of doom and gloom.
Yeah.
And there was a particular post that you wrote earlier this summer where it was called "Don't Believe We're Fucked." Maybe I'm not a doomer. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. I could put a bleep over it on the recording, I suppose. But it really it was one of those pieces where you read someone and you know this is something being told from the heart, from kind of really fresh experience of puzzling through things. So that was sort of what gave me the inspiration to want to record a conversation with you, because one of the questions that's been coming to the fore for me this year in these spaces of conversation that I'm part of convening is about the relationships and responsibilities between generations, how we show up for each other. And I mean, we're about a generation apart, I guess.
I think so. Are we going to drop the ages?
Well, it's going to be my birthday at the end of this week, and I'm going to be turning 47. So how about you?
I just turned 25 in October.
All right. Well, happy birthday, belated.
Well, happy early birthday as well.
And what I always do when I'm bringing people into these conversations is just to start by asking you to say a bit about where you call home.
Ooh, that's fun. So I moved around a lot when I was little, like across 3 different areas, like Worcester, Malvern, Hereford, countryside area. But as one does, I met a Brummie and I moved to Birmingham. And it's quite interesting where we live, because I live on the old Rover factory, and my boyfriend's dad used to work here. So he used to work here making the cars and everything. And then when it shut down, it was really dead for a while. And then it's been really gentrified now, which I'm not sure how I feel about that. But I do think it's really interesting that we get to live on an apartment on top of somewhere where his dad used to work. And there's all little things around here, which I'll find out, oh, my mum used to live over here. My mum's first husband used to run this corner shop when he was younger. Like I find so many little bits like that come together where someone you know or someone's uncle or someone's cousin used to work around where you live. And I think it's so fun.
It's a very vivid, very literal version of something that's so kind of true for lots of people, isn't it? The kind of living in the post-industrial society that's built inside or built on the ruins
Yeah.
of an earlier era of industrial
Yeah. It
modernity.
is exactly. And I think a lot of art, like I wish I was someone who lived in the countryside and lived in this cottage somewhere where there was no one to see and no shops and no nothing. Because like I live right next to a big Sainsbury's and a big Marks and Spencer's. And although I'd love to be that person who like, oh, I'm going to go to the garden and get all my food. It's like, I do like going to buy my little tub of oat milk from Sainsbury's sometimes.
Well, I mean, I said this to Liz Oldfield and also Ashley Colby from Doomer Optimism, who's
Yeah.
just her family. They've just moved back to Chicago, where both her and her husband are from. That actually, I think it's really important in these conversations that it isn't just a bunch of people who are living in little villages or on farmsteads talking to each other, because we need to
Yeah.
figure out how we make lives work and make sense of our lives in all
Mhm.
paradoxes of the trouble we're in and the work that's called for in all the different kinds of places.
Yeah.
That
And
people
I think people forget. I read a lot of people who are really interested in like this return to nature type thing and living in these more natural places. But I think that we forget that this isn't all going to disappear. Like this apartment block is going to be standing. My lease is only for 250 years. Like that's a short lease in my mind. But this apartment block is going to be probably standing for a lot longer than that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's it. I mean, maybe that's part of why I talk about ruins, because ruins are the reminder that, when things come to an end, they don't just disappear. They leave traces and then we reuse them and reimagine them. And that's kind of, those are all the conversations that I met you because you read at Work in the Ruins and you joined one of our series and got involved in the life around a school called Home. And in the piece that you wrote earlier in the summer, I had this feeling of this really cathartic moment that you had a kind of tear-stained moment, both realizing the sort of assumptions that you'd taken into your body and actually calling them into question. So I wonder if you'd just relive that
Yeah.
for me.
So I it was honestly reading your book, which was, I think, the turning point when I went. I remember because it was December 2022. I think I read a Jason Hickel book and I was like, oh crap, we're all a bit, ooh. And then I read a few books around it, and then it was like February or March around the time I read At Work in the Ruins. And it was the first time that I'd been introduced to that topic of like, well, maybe we don't have to save the world. Maybe we can save this world. Maybe we can start building the new world. And that's around the time I started writing publicly for the first time, writing to figure things out, I like to call it. And I had gotten really into that doomerism mindset, and it helped at first. I really liked it did bring peace that, like, okay, this world isn't quite right. We can find a new way to do things. But like I said in my post, I'd taken it a bit too far, and it genuinely was. Because we've been thinking about moving house and buying a new house and where do we want to live and what sort of lives do we want to live and do we want to move abroad? Do we want to have kids? Do we want to get a dog? Like these really big conversations that I have quite frequently. And I just could not express why I was just distraught. And I was literally just crying. And I was like, but the world's gonna end. And my boyfriend was like, what do you mean? And I was like, climate, like, I don't think I think on this online world, a lot of us are really understanding of what future is coming. And I think we hold that a lot. And I don't want to tell my friends a lot of the time my true opinion on what things I think are gonna happen or feelings I have around things. So I don't want to scare them. And I don't think I'd quite had the conversation with my boyfriend fully about what I actually believed. This person who was closest to me in my life. And he was like, okay, so what exactly are you going to do about it? Like, what is this plan? If you think the world's ending, are you personally saving it? Like, why are you so upset? What are you, Like it was being really lovely about it, but it was genuinely like, what do you mean? And I was like, I don't know. I think I'd actually got into my head that I was somehow gonna buy an off-grid house and grow all my own food and like have some sort of bunker or some way to survive any sort of future that was gonna come. But I didn't quite have a plan of how I was gonna get there. I just had in my mind that it was gonna happen. And I was just like distraught. I was absolutely just can't do this anymore. I can't keep pushing ahead in this. Oh yeah, the world's ending. That's cool. That's exciting. Didn't really work.
And it sounded from the way that you told the story in the post, like in the moment of confessing that to your boyfriend, you also realized that there was a part of you that didn't fully buy that.
Yeah, because I think I say this, I go round on this, but I genuinely think if I genuinely believed the world was going to end, I think I would be doing more. If like I actually deeply thought this is it, bombs are going to be dropped, or food's going to run out, or this or that's going to happen. If I genuinely, deeply, wholly believed that, surely I would. I don't know, go join a commune or do something. But if I'm not doing that yet, I don't think I deeply believed it. And I think there's lots of prettiness and like, oh yeah, the world, we're going to build a new world and it's going to be a new society and it's going to be nice and we're all going to be intellectual and we're all going to, I'm going to fire roast marshmallows over the fire and do all this stuff. And I think it's nice to think about. I don't think it's actually the reality of what I actually wanted or what is actually going to happen type thing. And I did really realize I don't want, I quite like my life still a little bit. It's hard, but I don't quite want the world to end just yet. And it was nice. It was nice being able to say, actually, I don't think the world's going to end. I don't want the world to end, and I'm not going to just. Exactly.
I want to, yeah, I want to think together a bit about this because, I mean, I can remember being about the age that you are now when I sort of was first seriously getting on the path of the work that led me and Paul to writing the Dark Mountain Manifesto, and then sort of the 2008 global financial crisis came along, and there was that sort of autumn where things felt so close to unraveling. And I
Yeah,
remember, I remember having some serious conversations with people who knew a lot better than I did what was going on inside the financial system during that autumn, about the moments where it came really close to something much more dramatic than what actually
yeah,
happened. And so that was kind of part of the backdrop to us writing the manifesto. And I remember realizing at a certain point that events which are going to look in hindsight like they were sudden and dramatic play out in the background of us having to make lives and, and choose where we're going to live and deal with things that work out and things that don't work out, and start families and the rest of it. And to the extent that there's going to be somebody looking back 200 or 300 years down the line writing the history of this, if you're then reading that history, it might sound like there was this very dramatic
yeah,
unraveling, but lived at the tempo of human life. It was mostly something going on in the background.
yeah, definitely. I can remember my grandma used to tell me how she used to walk to school in the Second World War and bombs were being dropped. And I was like, what do you mean? You just went to school, you just went on. And I think, I know I feel like there's been weird times for as long as we've lived, but I definitely feel like every bloody year there's a new normal and new craziness and like, oh my God, this event is going to be the thing to change it all. Oh wait, no, this event is going to be the thing to change it all. Oh no, wait, this one's going to be the one to change it all. And I'm a bit like, all right, guys, can we shut up now? Because it's not happening.
I'm interested in what you said about there being a certain comfort in that first phase of kind of
Yeah,
resting for a while in a kind of doomer space. I think probably a lot of people have had some of that experience, and I'm thinking of something that Bayo Kamalafe said in the conversation that we had um, in Great Barrington in September. And he said, people come in to his sort of post-activism workshops, and he said often they arrive and they're in this kind of activist, want to take responsibility and change everything and fix everything mode. And by the end, they're in this and just sort of can just surrender. And he's like, that's not like, yeah, sure, there is a letting go, but swinging, as he said, swinging to the opposite end of the pendulum to just surrender, whatever happens, relinquishment of agency. That isn't it either. And I feel like that's part of what you're trying to name in this.
Exactly. Because I think I know so many people who are like, oh, well, everything's horrible and the economy's, if we say, the economy's fucked, the world's fucked, and everything's fucked. Therefore, I'm going to step away now. I can't do anything more. I have no control. I have no power. And that's the same as the overtly positivity, really, isn't it? Oh, like, everything's fine. We can be really optimistic. Mr. Elon Musk or whoever is going to say, I don't think we think Elon Musk is going to save the world anymore. Whoever we think is going to save the world, we're going to have this amazing technology. The government's going to help us all. And I think it's the both sides. You don't do anything. You're like, oh, okay. And I appreciated the doom because this is where I sort of map it with my Substack. I started writing in January of 2022. And like I had so much to say about the world's ending and this is good and I'm happy and everything. And I think you can only be in that for so long because then it's like, wait, now what? now what's next? Like, obviously, I've reached, and it's nice enough to have to be overtly positive all the time. It's nice not to be, oh yeah, this is the way to live and this is the right way to live. It's nice to be like, wait, stuff is actually bad. Stuff is actually happening. It takes away the cognitive dissonance of how you can sort of exist and know all these horrible things are going on. But I feel like we all got a lot of the writing and everything that I've been reading. I feel like a big collective of people have got there, and it's like, okay, now what? I don't quite figure out. People have figured that part out yet. We've got there, and it's like, wait. And I think probably this is why I see a lot of people turning to various types of religion or turning to various types of ways of living. I feel like that's their sort of solution, but I don't know what mine is yet.
Yeah, I mean, the now what? Maybe part of it is within that old model of agency, the thing that Bio is kind of inviting people away from with the language of activism, there tends to be an assumption that that now what is answered with a plan that we all want around, and that's how we change things. And letting go of that can feel in the first flush both like a relief and like just giving up completely. And it can look from outside like giving up completely in a way that is a really terrible thing to do. And the now what that you're talking about is, what if doing doesn't look like there being a plan, like a single kind of set of solutions that we need to unite behind, but still stuff worth doing.
Yeah. I do like that. I do like that. Because I think I don't want to talk too generally. I see amazing people who are, I think, on Substack mostly, I see amazing people living these lives and making these big changes and big decisions. And I'm like, okay, they're doing it. They're living in this post climate change, whatever world. And then it doesn't quite, I'm still not doing enough. I wasn't doing enough beforehand and I still don't feel like I'm quite doing enough. But I think I came across the term working in your own circle of influence like recently. And I do feel like that feels a little bit better. And like I wrote in my post that rather than everything I'm doing is awful, every day that I wake up and turn my laptop on with horrible minerals mined from the Congo, and every time I go to Sainsbury's and every time I buy a new jumper, I'm being a horrible, awful person. And I'm supporting all these horrible, awful systems. And I'm killing the world myself. Changing it from that to every step is an improvement. Everything I do is me getting better and making the world better. And I've tried many things to make the world better and it doesn't quite fit right, but I'm still finding my way, and I'm still weaving my path, and all the little steps I've taken, even if they're not quite right, I'm still making my world right, I like to think. And that only really works when I'm in a good mood. When I'm feeling awful, that doesn't quite work all the time.
Yeah, there is that line about taking doing the next right thing, taking the next good step. And I mean, so one thing that I'm conscious of in all of this, as I say, I've been thinking a lot this year about the way that we show up for each other across generations. And there's a lot of talk about, and there's been a lot of sort of relief and release into talking about and being with grief and mourning, and particularly lately, this language of lament has kind of come forward in a way that I find quite helpful, because it's part of being true to the trouble of the times we're in. But I also, and I've said this to some of my friends who are sort of a generation older than me, I've also begun to be troubled at times by the difference between what a focus on grief and mourning and lament means. If you're at a point in life where you're already, the end of your natural lifespan is coming over the horizon, versus what it asks, of me as the parent of a 9-year-old, or you in your mid-20s thinking about what's worth doing, what decisions you make with your life. And I want to gently be sort of making this invitation to friends who are in their 60s and 70s, of going, how do we make sure that there is a sober, like lamenting what is, lamenting the great deal of loss that's part of what it is to be alive now, but not in a way that just leaves you guys feeling like, what's left for us?
Oh, exactly. And I think, it is so, I think it's so much easier to think, oh, doomerism is easy and seeing all of this crumbling. I feel like it seems so much easier when you've lived your life, you're happy with the life you lived, and now you can then turn your attention to this future and this, what does this look like? I'm going to start doing the work. And I see this a lot with people who they've worked for a living, they've bought their houses, and now in like their 40s, 50s, and 60s, they're like, okay, I can go buy some land now and live off it. And I'm like, oh, good for some, good for some. And that, like, I feel like I've really been struggling over the last few years, because I feel like I sort of have to build the two futures, because no one quite knows when this is all gonna combust. Like, it could still be going the next 30 years. And then I'll be the 50-year-old who's like, oh yeah, everywhere's gone. But I feel like I have to, the world, I'm building a future in this society, and then I also have to build a future in this post-climate society. And it's like, I have to do two things simultaneously. And it's like, oh my God. I do think I've had elders in the past sort of dismiss my anxieties and angst of like this, of the usual mid-20s finding yourself thing. But I feel like it is more than this, because I feel like it's more than just a general angst. It's genuinely like, do I fully commit to the world and the society we live in now, and hope that those who are in power and those who have the knowledge will save it? Or do I completely abandon this and then fully commit to this? Okay, let's look after myself, which is also a bit individualist. Look, like, try and find this way of going, or what I've settled in is doing both. But it's tough, and I don't know. And I've been thinking, like, what do I want the people who are older to think, and what do I want them to do for me? But I don't I don't know yet. I don't know. I do find that I have moved away from certain spaces where I feel like they're all really excited for the end of the world, and I'm like, wait, guys, I'm not there yet. My life has only just begun. I'm only just trying to figure this out. And I think I'm still staying with do I actually want to let go of this world? Do I actually want to let go of the way things are? They are quite nice in some aspects.
Yeah. I mean, that's sort of why, for me, it was important to end the book with the 4 tasks, and what are the things we want to try and salvage and bring with us? Because there are plenty of things we don't want to lose if we can help it, for world as we've known it, as well as things that it would be good to leave behind. And we don't get like, it's not like we get to sit above, like we're designing something. We're all just muddling through and trying to make lives in the middle of all of this. And I mean, two things I was thinking about as you were saying that. One is, I think something that helped me when I was in my 20s was coming across John Michael Greer's catabolic collapse. I think that's what he called this model, where he's like, look, it's not about there being a day when everything collapses and there was the before and the after.
Mm.
Like what happens is it happens over decades, over generations. There's moments of crisis where it looks like everything's unraveling, and then things stabilize, but they stabilize somewhere like at a lower level of complexity than before that crisis. And so you're going to live through various episodes of this. And maybe that's part of what helped me begin to develop that sort of the double sight, where you can have one eye on what works now and one eye on, which parts of that have a chance of working well where we're headed.
Yeah, I think I was too far in the, and I think we see it with our disaster films and the way society sort of predicts the end of the world. It's like, so one day you're going about your business, and then the next day the world is over and bombs have been dropped, and or aliens have come to that, like whatever it is, the way they present it was like immediate. And I think I got into, I call it prep for anxiety. Like I genuinely thought I could like somehow prepare for this one moment of catastrophe, and like, oh, if I grow enough food, then when the supermarkets like all run out, like in the 3 days we have or whatever, oh, I'm just gonna save myself. But I would much rather put my effort into slowly building the community than building this hyper individualistic. What are we gonna save ourselves?
Yeah, totally.
Type thing.
And anyway, that kind of building of community and building of relationships is more resilient for the times when things go wrong than the kind of consumer fantasy of the individual prepper, which is just a sort of it's just a kind of turn on the general logic of the supermarkets and the rest of it anyway. I mean, the other bit that struck me when you were saying before about watching the people in their 40s or 50s or 60s who've kind of had a first career and been lucky within the existing system, buying a bit of land, it really struck home to me. I had a friend who was talking about finally arriving on a bit of land in his 50s and mourning for his younger self, for the part of him that was ready for this when he was in his 20s, when he
Had
was
the energy.
Yeah, exactly. And more and more, I feel like one of the things that I want to try and bring together is a conversation about, right, how do we create pathways into secure relationship to land that allow people in their 20s or 30s to be getting involved with firstly learning skills and figuring out whether this is really what they want, and then to the extent that that is the case, getting into a secure ability to be on some land, to be living with, growing food, making that land alive
Yeah.
in ways that they have a chance of them being part of the rest of their lives. And that's that sounds almost like a utopian dream, I think, when I talk to people your age. And it's part of the challenge maybe to bring to people my age or a generation older is how do we help make that a more plausible possibility for more young people.
I think there's such that missing piece in between. The two things I thought then is I've had discussions with my friend about this. I freelance, so I have no workplace, no connections that way. I don't have kids. I don't have school community. I didn't grow up in Birmingham. I moved here, and then I tried, like, I've sort of had to build my friendships up from the ground. I don't bloody know how to find any sort of community. It's really tough. I don't know how to connect with people who think the same things as me, or at least have the same sort of ideas around where things are going. And I think it's really easy to find it online, but I've done it online, and now I'm like pivoting to real life. I don't know how to do this. And I think especially as an introverted person, I'm like, I don't want to go to these events on my own. Jesus. Again, and I think in the individualistic type mindset, I had an allotment for 6 months. I was like, yeah, I'm going to grow some food. I'm going to make the use of, I live in an apartment right now. I have a really shady balcony. I can't grow anything. The next best thing to me seems to do an allotment. I did not know what I was doing. I spent so much time and killed like all of my plants. I killed all of my vegetables, basically. I just needed someone to just come with me and just look at it and help me a bit. And I'm just like, I think we try to do things on our own. We try to do the things that we think are right. Like I'm like, okay, well, I need to build these skills that might help me at the end of the world. I don't know how. I need help. I need help. Maybe that's why I need to ask my elders is please help.
And that's, I think one thing here is, the need to be both kind of clear and self-reflective of that in the way that you've just done, and to be kind to ourselves and go, you know what? We're trying to, as you say, we're trying to operate between two realities. We're trying to learn things that we feel would be good things to know without starting from a culture or a society that felt like we ought to know these things.
Yeah. And I feel like it's so important, especially over the next 10 years. My grandparents are all gone now. They were all in their 80s. And like my parents were a bit older when they had me, and my grandparents were a bit older when they had them. So like that's gone now. They had allotments. Like my grandma and granddad, they had 2 allotments themselves. Like there's all this knowledge that I feel like if we aren't quick, it's gonna go. And we need to figure out how to get this knowledge and get it passed down quickly. And I feel like this expectation of knowledge. I saw it a lot over Halloween, and I saw a lot of criticizing of parents who were like doing pumpkins with their kids, and it's like, well, technically you shouldn't carve pumpkins anymore. You should paint them, and then you should use the inside of the pumpkins, and you should cook with them, and all this. And it was like, how are parents buying all this pumpkins and all wasting it all? But I'm like, no, actually, no, I don't know how to cook a pumpkin. I don't have the time or the mental energy to cook a pumpkin. Like, I feel like there's a big gap in what, people should be doing, but no one's telling people how to do it.
Well, we had an epic harvest of pumpkins last year, so we ended up learning a lot about the things you can do with a pumpkin. But it's also cooking for 1 or 2 is different to cooking for 3 or 4 or more. Mm-hmm. There is you talked a lot about the sort of the individualistic nature of the default mode in the kind of societies that we're starting from. And one of the symptoms of that is just that the kind of the logic of getting together and cooking and making real food works better when there's a few of you than when you're doing it on your own or for 2 of you. And maybe those are the kind of starting points as well, is where's somewhere where I can get involved in helping to cook food and learn a bit more myself in the process. But there's also, when you talk about how we find community, I think one thing is if you can find someone to buddy up with, to venture into those in real life spaces on your doorstep, that helps a lot versus being an introvert going into it solo. I can definitely relate to that. Also, I feel more and more like we need multiple kinds of community. Mm-hmm. My dad always says this. He says, community is a good thing. It's best to have more than one that you belong to, because if you reach a point where you're torn between you're getting your sense of belonging from membership of a community and there being something that really troubles you within that community, then you can be in a difficult, like painful, vulnerable place. And so having more than one place of belonging, more than one setting is a good thing in its own right. But also, I feel like it matters a lot to me to have these online communities with people around the world where I can talk about stuff that isn't going to be what I start with when I go down the street and walk into the local church or community organization or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And I feel like I need both. It would be a mistake for me to get too lost in being in the communities of people who are asking the same questions that I'm asking and talking about the same things. But also, I need that to give me some of the resilience and energy for the other things that I go into locally, where I can take less for granted in terms of us having the same ideas or starting from the same places, but where we have more in common in terms of needing to figure out how we make life work together, living in the same place. So there's something there, I think, about how, like, recognizing those moments where it's like I've gone too far into drawing it all from this one side.
I think I do like that idea of having the multiple communities, because I think something we're missing right now, I think you can especially see it in the world of politics, is, and maybe not the world of politics, maybe it's just I feel like being online, on TikTok, in social media, there seems to be this culture of you either agree with what someone says 100% or they're a horrible person, you shouldn't interact with them. And it's like, oh, if your family believes this politically or does this, you can't speak to them and you can't be friends with them. And I grew up online where it was just the start of, I feel like, this really, oh yeah, you cut out toxic people and you should never be friends with someone who, and it's always look out for number one, look out for yourself. It's this weird hyper individualism that I feel like is just becoming more and more and more online. And I think there's so much where is if you go somewhere in real life and it's like, well, they don't agree with me 100%, and I think that they're not actually spending their time where they should be spending their time, and therefore I'm not going to be in this at all, and I'm not going to make an effort with these people. And I think I would struggle to go to like a community garden or a nice group meeting in real life and start talking about the end of the world and how everything's going to collapse. I think that would be a bit scared of me. And also, I don't feel like it's right to just assume everyone has reached that, because it is a big emotional and mental upheaval to come to terms with that. I don't feel like we can just start. And I think this is why I don't speak to people in real life maybe as much as I should, because I'm scared I'm going to drop them in this horrible realization.
Yeah, it's funny, the more we're talking about this, the more I'm thinking how, in ways, I feel like I'm reaching the end of wanting to talk in that language of, because I've always said from the Dark Mountain Manifesto onwards, like the line that I always come back to from the manifesto is the end of the world as we know it. It's not the end of the world, full stop. But actually, I feel like I'm reaching the end of the usefulness of that language. Because anyway, you can't say the end of the world as we know it without conjuring up this scariness, the kind of impact that you're describing. And I feel like I've had friends who've told me that they've tried to share at work in the ruins with their partners or whatever, and the very opening page of feels like it's been coming all my adult life. The end of the world as we know it is enough to make them shut down and go, can't deal with this.
But for some reason we think, and I see it all over social media, because obviously I work in climate, so I open like my LinkedIn and it's like, here's all the horrible things that have happened this week. And it's like, we think we're meant to keep abreast of it, but just flood. I think we have this idea as if we flood people with this information, soon they'll realize, like, if people just knew, they know, people know, you can feel it outside that it's getting hotter. Like, it's not some unusual thing. People know, they don't know deep inside, maybe.
Yeah, or they don't know what to do with it. But for reasons similar to what you've been talking about in conversation, that, if knowing fixed things, then knowing would be a lot more popular.
We'd have figured it out by now. And I think sometimes I have to not know. Sometimes I have to put it aside and just pretend that it's not a real thing. And sometimes I have to do things that are maybe less. Because I think this, and I think I said this earlier, like, would I really shop at the supermarket and do sometimes buy new clothes and have a holiday if I really knew, if I really felt it deeply? But you got to take a break sometimes or else you will go crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking about the way that Vanessa and the Gesturing Towards Decolonial Futures Collective talk about all of this. And one of the things they talk about is sort of moving with the storm. Like, you can't rush ahead and try to get further on in the story, further on in the process than is actually true. And the other thing is, maybe this speaks to the thing I was trying to name earlier about the mourning and grieving bit, is that what I always liked from the very first encounter I had with Vanessa's work was the hospicing modernity part is always balanced with the assisting with the birth of something new, unknown, and probably, but not necessarily wiser. And that there's sort of two sides to it rather than it all being about an age of endings.
Yeah. And I think we present the climate crisis and all the crises, all the issues we have with race and gender and all the wars and everything that we love to go on. It's always, and I think this is why people pull back, and I think this is why there's been such a big movement recently of men's rights activists and all this, is because when you're constantly telling people, no, you're wrong and you're a bad person, you can't have this and you can't do this, and by doing this, you're actually killing our planet, and by doing this, you're making all these people horrible and uncomfortable, and by buying this, you're putting all these people in awful situations. And no one's actually talking about how maybe it might be better for everyone if we moved forward in a better way, like how a world that treads more gently on the earth is better for people. Like, it's nicer. It's a nicer way to live, and you'll be healthier and happier rather than just constantly being told you're wrong and you have to give up all the things that you've worked hard for.
Yeah, I feel like when I say that I'm reaching the end of wanting to be associated with this language of the end of the world as we know it, the language that's been coming forward more and more for me this year is a world worth living for.
I do love that.
Yeah, I feel like what absolutely isn't there in that messaging that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Any sense that what's at stake here is not saving or making sustainable the world as some of us have known it around here lately, but there being a world worth living for that that doesn't start on the far side of some event that we can't predict when or where it's going to occur, but that we can actually be part of right now in parts of our lives, in corners of our lives, alongside the parts of our lives that are spent inside with all of the contradictions of a system that we're not going to manage to make sustainable.
Exactly. And I think it's all, I can't see any part of making the world a better place to live, a nicer place to live, a healthier place to live. I can't see any like bad things. Like, I don't think anyone's going to be that much worse off. I can't believe anyone's going to be that much unhealthier or that much unhappier. I feel like we're going forward the way we are with our new batteries for electric cars and everything. There are so many people who are being made unhealthier and happier. And I think, again, just need to emphasize that part a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah, I think my way of saying it would be to say we need to recognize how unlivable the world as it is just now is in multiple ways. On the one hand, for the people at the far end of supply chains and on the receiving end of extractive processes whose lives we'd like to think about because it would spoil our appetite. But actually also in many ways for those who are on the fortunate end, the systems that hold things together right now, because there are things that are really, self-destructive about what is what currently on offer.
Yeah. And I think maybe this is a bit, I always fear to say this because I'm like, it's a bit too positive. It's a bit too, oh, you live in a dream world. It's like, I even think the people who are saying, yes, let's drill here and yes, let's do this there, they're not happy. Like, they're not content and safe and comfortable inside. They're doing it because they think that this is what they need to do to have a safer life and provide a better life for their children and bring their life forward and be happy and be comfortable. They're not doing it because they hate everyone. They're not doing it because they hate poor people. They're doing it, I think, maybe there's some hating on poor people somewhere, but I think deep down, everyone's just trying to keep themselves safe.
Yeah, there's a question of imagination and of how do we make a world worth living for imaginable, which is not just about conjuring up some beautiful picture of how it could be in X decades time if we make all the right choices and come up with the right plan, but that actually involves a shift of attention within the world as it is already. Something like that.
Yeah, and I think maybe a bit more scary, but like I think it was Joanna Macy. She wrote about how a lot of her work is to stop people from turning on each other at these endpoints and to stop people from like just living in dangerous ways. And I think trying to look after ourselves and the individual, I need to do it all perfectly and I need to do this right and I need to grow my own food and get my own water. It's very individual and it's very like, this is mine, not you. I'm looking after myself. Whereas if we think more about community, it's everyone's going to go a bit hungry, but at least everyone will have eaten something, maybe.
Well, Isabelle, thank you for taking the time to sit down and record this conversation. Share a bit of the view from where you are, and good luck as you go on trying to narrate all of this through the things that you're writing.
Thank you. I'm excited to see where your new ways of thinking lead you. Maybe you'll help me find an answer.
Well, let's go on talking, and see where we take each other. Thanks for this conversation.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Homeward Bound with me, Dougal Tyne. You'll find links to Isabelle's work in the show notes for this episode. There'll be more episodes of Homeward Bound and The Great Humbling coming in the weeks ahead. Meanwhile, don't hesitate to get in touch. You can follow the podcasts at homewardbound.org. You can find my work at dougal.nu. It's always great to hear from you. Thank you for listening. Thank you.